I sold my old apartment and gave my entire life savings to my son and daughter-in-law so they could buy a new house. I didn't say a word when they treated me like a freeloader. I only quietly collected every receipt, every bank statement, every recording of their cruel threats. And what happened next had the whole neighborhood buzzing with endless talk. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. And let me know in the comments where you're hearing my revenge story from. I want to know how far it's spread. I stood frozen as Naomi grabbed my clothes and stuffed them straight into a black garbage bag. Then she turned, looked me dead in the eyes with a cold smile, and shouted, "From now on, this house is no longer yours." Those words hit me like a bucket of ice water, choking the breath in my chest. I, who sold my apartment, scraped together every penny I'd saved my whole life, and gave it all to my son and his wife to buy this house, was now treated like a freeloader. I stood in the living room, surrounded by furniture bought with my money, feeling like a stranger. Lucas, the son I birthed and raised, sat there, head down, avoiding my gaze, while Naomi flopped onto the brand new armchair I'd paid for, smirking triumphantly. My shirts, my dresses, worn during happy days with my husband, now lay crumpled at the bottom of a garbage bag, like trash. I thought of the small apartment I used to live in, the one I sold with the belief that living with my children would bring a warm home for my old age. I thought of Lucas's smile the day we signed the papers, and Naomi's promise, "Don't worry, Mom, we'll take care of you until the end." All of it now just lies. I felt heavy, as if I were holding 1,000 pounds of trampled memories. Outside, neighbors peered through the window, whispering to each other, witnessing an old woman being thrown out of the very house she'd built. Tears welled up inside me, but at the same time something else ignited. No longer weakness, no longer endurance. The words, "This house is no longer yours," awakened a resolve in me I didn't know I had. I knew clearly this wasn't the end. This was the beginning, and I wouldn't let myself be discarded, like the clothes in that garbage bag. I sat dazed on the edge of the bed, my eyes still fixed on the black garbage bag, where Naomi had just stuffed my clothes. The echo of her words kept ricocheting in my head. "From now on, this house is no longer yours." I touched my chest, feeling like my heart was being squeezed, and in that moment, memories flooded back, like a film rewinding uncontrollably. I remembered the day I signed the papers to sell the small apartment where I'd lived for over 30 years, filled with memories of me and Robert, my late husband. It wasn't just a home. It was where we started our life together, where Lucas let out his first cry, where we celebrated warm Christmases. But when Lucas called, his voice urgent yet hopeful, I didn't hesitate. "Mom, that apartment is old. If you sell it, Naomi and I can buy a new house. You'll have a spacious room. We'll be closer. You won't have to worry alone anymore." I was moved to silence. A mother's heart longed to be near her son, to live surrounded by family, so I agreed. The day I sold the apartment, my hand trembled as I signed, but my heart was full of trust. I told myself, "Robert, I'm doing the right thing. I'm giving everything to our son, so he can have a home, so my old age will have his laughter and our grandchildren." I still remember that morning, sunlight streaming through the office window, lighting up Lucas's face as he hugged me tightly. "You're the best mom in the world. I promise to take care of you." I cried with happiness. Naomi hugged me too, whispering, "Thank you, Mom. You've given us our future. I'll treat you like my own mother." I believed it all. It didn't stop there. I withdrew my entire savings, every penny I'd scrimped from my days working at the old bookstore, plus my meager pension. For years, I didn't buy myself a new dress, didn't travel, didn't replace the worn-out sofa, all because I thought of the day Lucas would start a family, and I could give him a good start. That money, plus the proceeds from the apartment, I gave it all to my son. When I handed over the check, my hand shook, but my heart felt light. I thought I was planting seeds for a new spring, where I wouldn't be alone in a creaky old apartment, but would have the sound of grandchildren's footsteps, laughter around the dinner table, the warmth of a real family. When the new house was finished, Naomi insisted the deed only list Lucas and her, Mom doesn't need to be on the title. It's too complicated. Think of it as a wedding gift from you. I hesitated, but Lucas took my hand, smiling. Mom, I'm your son. This house is yours too. I nodded, letting trust override caution. I told myself, no need for paperwork. Love is the real proof. The day we moved into the new house, I was as excited as a child. I personally made the bed, hung my and Robert's wedding photo in my small bedroom. I cooked a lavish dinner to celebrate: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, apple pie. Lucas ate heartily, but Naomi took one bite, set her fork down, and frowned. This food is too old-fashioned. I'll probably order takeout. I forced a smile, telling myself it was just an offhand comment. But deep down, I sensed something was wrong. In the early days, I still believed things would warm up. I woke early to sweep the yard, water the flowers, make coffee for Lucas before work. I even gave Naomi a credit card in my name for emergencies. I thought it would show trust, and maybe affection would grow. But as days passed, I realized I was becoming a shadow in the very house I'd sacrificed my life for. Naomi started calling me old lady instead of mom. Family dinners became rare, replaced by evenings where Lucas came home late. Naomi went out with friends, and I sat alone in the kitchen with a cold plate of food. Every time I looked around the spacious house, the freshly painted walls, the gleaming wood floors, I thought of my old apartment, small, but filled with love, where Robert made me tea every evening, where little Lucas did homework at the old wooden table. I'd sold all those memories, only to get empty dinners and my own tired sighs. I tried to convince myself the sacrifices were worth it. I told myself, Naomi just needs time. She'll come around. But the truth became clearer. Naomi grew more dismissive, and Lucas sank into silence. I started to see my sacrifice wasn't a gift, but a chain, tying me to being an unwanted guest in the home I'd built. I still vividly remember the first morning in the new house, when gentle sunlight streamed through my small bedroom window. I woke early, brewed a pot of hot coffee, prepared toast and fruit, hoping we'd sit together for a warm family breakfast. I carried the tray to the table, my heart full of hope for a new start, the cozy family I'd dreamed of for years. But that hope shattered when Naomi came downstairs. She frowned at the coffee I'd poured, tilting her chin. Mom, Lucas and I drink machine espresso, not this outdated drip coffee. Her voice was sharp, dripping with disdain. Lucas, instead of defending me, silently drank the coffee, as if fearing a storm if he spoke up. The next day, I cooked dinner with all my love. Robert's beef stew recipe, a family favorite. Naomi looked at the pot on the table and smirked. Stew's too greasy, not healthy. I ordered sushi. It'll be here soon. You can keep the stew. Her words cut through my fragile hope like a knife. I forced a smile, hid the bitterness, and ate alone in silence. The cracks started showing clearly from then. My clothes in the laundry room were pushed aside for Naomi's designer dresses. My cheap toiletries in the bathroom vanished, replaced by rows of luxury products I could never afford. When I asked, Naomi said curtly, "Oh, I probably threw them out. Those cheap things don't fit the new bathroom. They look tacky." I stood frozen, clutching a wet towel, as if holding years of scrimping and sacrifice, now casually discarded. Worse, Robert's precious belongings, his old pocket watch, rare stamp collection, our silver wedding photo frame, started disappearing. When I asked, Naomi just smiled. "You probably misplaced them, Mom. I'll help look." But they never reappeared. Lucas sighed and dodged the topic, as if my life's keepsakes weren't worth his concern. In that moment, I felt I wasn't just losing objects, but the basic respect from those I loved. Once, while reading in the living room, Naomi came in with friends. She frowned at me. "Mom, my friends are here. Can you go to your room? The living room's a bit crowded." I clutched my book, stood, and walked slowly upstairs, my heart heavy. This was the living room I'd paid for. Every chair, every rug, yet I was shooed away like a stray. Each evening, when Lucas came home late, I hoped he'd talk to me, but Naomi always pulled him into their room right after dinner. Their soft laughter came through the closed door, while I sat alone in the big kitchen, the yellow light casting shadows on my cold leftovers. I remembered the old days, Just the three of us, eating and laughing, little Lucas running around the table, giggling. Now those memories only deepened my pain, so starkly different from the present. One night, I overheard Naomi on the phone. Her voice was sharp. "The old lady thinks this is her house. How ridiculous. It won't be long before she's out. I can't stand her lingering around." I held my breath outside the door, my heart pounding. Those words stripped away her last pretense of kindness. The most painful part was Lucas's silence. When Naomi snapped, when she spewed cruel words, when I was pushed out of the living room or lost precious keepsakes, Lucas stayed silent, avoiding me, as if his silence could shield everything. But that silence was the deadliest blow. I wasn't just scorned by my daughter-in-law, I was abandoned by my own son. Those cracks started small, like fissures in glass, but day by day, they spread, splitting wide, signaling an inevitable collapse. I'd sacrificed my apartment, my money, even my memories, for a home I thought would be warm. But slowly, I realized I was just a despised guest, a ghost in the house I'd built with my life. After months of being looked down on and pushed to the sidelines, in the very house I'd given everything to build, I realized something even more bitter. I wasn't just an unwanted guest, I was becoming Naomi's financial lifeline. At first it was subtle, so clever, I even convinced myself it was just convenience. I remember the first time Naomi asked to use my credit card for some house items. "Mom, the living room sofa you bought is a bit small. I saw a new set on sale. Can I use your card? I'll pay it back." Her voice was sweet, her eyes pleading, as if refusing would make me stingy. I nodded, thinking it was minor, but the sofa was never repaid, and it was just the start. From then on, strange bills started arriving. Receipts from luxury clothing stores, expensive spas, fancy restaurants. I was shocked to see a single charge worth 2 months of my pension. When I showed Naomi the bills, she shrugged. "Oh, must be a mistake. I'll call to check." Then silence. The next month, similar bills came. Lucas just said, "Mom, I'm busy. Naomi's probably handling it. Don't stress." His words stung. He wouldn't even look me in the eye. One evening, while cleaning the living room, I overheard Naomi bragging on the phone. Her voice was smug. "The old lady, she's my personal ATM. Whenever I need something, I just put on a sad face, and she hands over the card." I trembled, gripping the broom so hard my knuckles turned white. I'd spent my life sacrificing, loving, and now I was a joke. It didn't stop at the credit card. Naomi cleverly convinced Lucas to borrow money from me for investments. One day, they sat me down with papers spread on the table. Naomi said, "Mom, there's a restaurant business opportunity. If it works, you'll have a share. Live comfortably for the rest of your life." I listened, but Naomi's eyes held no respect, only calculation. Lucas looked at me pleadingly, like a child begging for candy. I nodded, signed the check, telling myself I was part of their plans. But months later, the restaurant never existed. The money vanished, and no one mentioned it again. My fear peaked one afternoon when I checked my bank account and saw a large transfer to an unfamiliar account. My hands shook so much, I nearly dropped the phone. When I asked Lucas, he stammered, while Naomi said casually, "I used it for a deposit on a vacation. You're coming too, so what's the issue?" But I was never invited. I stayed home, eating simple meals, while Naomi posted beach photos online. The height of her cruelty came one evening when Naomi stormed into the kitchen, tossed the electric and water bills on the table, and said bluntly, "You live here, you need to contribute. This isn't a free hotel." I froze. I, who sold my apartment, who paid nearly all the money for this house, was now asked to pay rent to stay. Lucas sat there, silent as always, eyes on the table. I felt not just anger, but a humiliation I couldn't describe. That night, I sat in my room, opening the small cabinet where I kept my financial records. I flipped through every bank statement, every receipt, every signed check. Each number was like a knife to my heart. Thousands for dresses, thousands for restaurants, tens of thousands for investments that never existed, all from the sweat and tears I'd saved my whole life. I thought of Robert, how we decided to save every penny for a peaceful retirement. If he were alive, he'd be heartbroken to see it squandered on frivolous fun. But what scared me most wasn't the lost money. It was realizing I was being cornered into dependence. Naomi didn't just want my money. She wanted to control my life. Every time I pushed back, she mentioned nursing homes. You're old. Where else would you go? If you're unhappy, I can arrange a spot and a home. Those words rang colder than any winter I'd known. I sat in the dark, staring at the stack of bills. For the first time, instead of crying, I felt a chill run down my spine. I realized my silence had made me easy prey. If I didn't stand up, there'd be no end. They'd drain me of money, dignity, freedom. In that moment, I knew one day I'd settle the score, and Naomi would no longer hold all the power. I thought I'd grown used to the disdain, the cold glares, and Naomi's blunt words. I thought I could endure a bit more, that my love for Lucas would salvage everything. But that afternoon, I realized there are humiliations no one can bear. It was a gray day, heavy clouds rolling in, the air thick like a storm was coming. I was in my room, folding clothes, when Naomi's voice shrieked from downstairs. "Come down here now. I told you this can't go on." Her tone was sharp as a blade. I walked down the stairs, my legs heavy as lead. In the living room, the sight hit me like a blow. My clothes, shoes, bags, strewn across the floor, like garbage ready to be tossed. Naomi stood with black trash bags, face flushed, eyes blazing. "You think this is your storage unit?" she screamed, voice dripping with contempt. "This isn't a museum for your old, filthy stuff. I don't want to see a single thing of yours in my space anymore." I stood frozen, my chest tight, breathing shallow. "Naomi, these are my things, what I kept from before I moved here. I helped pay for." I didn't finish before she lunged, grabbed the stack of clothes from my hands, and stuffed them into the bag. The rustle of plastic mixed with my pounding heartbeat. It was as if she was throwing away me, my life, my memories. "From now on, this house is no longer yours," she yelled, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. I glanced at the window. Sure enough, a few neighbors stood by the fence, staring. Their faces showed curiosity mixed with pity. My cheeks burned, but my heart was ice cold. I was being publicly humiliated in what should have been my safe haven. Lucas stood by the doorway. My son, the child I'd cherished, raised with all my love and sacrifice, stood silent, head bowed. I waited, second by second, hoping he'd say something, anything. "Naomi, don't do this to Mom." But his silence was louder than any scream. His shoulders trembled, but his lips stayed sealed. That cowardice stabbed my heart deeper than Naomi's cruelty. Naomi kept dragging my dresses, my old shoes, stuffing them into the bags. "You're old. You should know your place. This is mine, and Lucas's house. If you want your own space, rent a room somewhere." Or she smirked, "The nursing home is always open." Her mocking laugh chilled me to the bone. I heard neighbors whispering, "God, how can they treat her like that?" Someone stepped forward to intervene, but Naomi's glare sent them back. I felt exposed, humiliated to my core. I lunged to grab my things, but Naomi shoved me hard, and I fell to the floor. The pain shot through my back, my vision blurred, but I didn't cry. Tears welled up, but I swallowed them. In that moment, something in me died, the part that believed my son and daughter-in-law would love and respect me. But something else awoke, a fierce, cold strength I didn't know I had. Naomi stood, hands on hips, panting, looking at me with a victorious glare. Lucas stepped forward to help me up, but I pushed his hand away. I stood, trembling but proud. I looked straight into Naomi's eyes, my voice low and steady. "You can throw out my clothes, but you'll never throw me out. I lived my whole life to build this house, and I won't let anyone treat me like garbage." Naomi laughed mockingly. "We'll see. I can make you disappear from this house faster than you think." I turned to Lucas, my eyes wet but fierce. "How long will you stay silent? You watch your mother be humiliated like this and say nothing?" Lucas's lips moved, but he bowed his head again, silent like a child cornered. Disappointment surged, choking me like a wave in my throat. As Naomi dragged the trash bags to the door and threw them onto the steps in front of the neighbors, I stood in the dark living room, my trembling hands gripping the back of a chair. I was no longer the patient mother. yearning for her son's affection. I had been pushed to the very edge, and from that edge, I felt a new strength rising within me. I knew the humiliation of today would not be buried in silence. It would become a fire, melting the chains I had bound myself with all these years. That night, I sat alone in the cold room, watching the trash bag in the yard being tossed by the wind. I thought of Robert, his words echoing, "Margaret, you're much stronger than you think." I clenched my fists, tears streaming down, but this time they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of a silent vow. I would never let myself be discarded again, and Naomi would pay for everything she had done. That night, the house was steeped in silence. Naomi had slammed her bedroom door, and Lucas, as always, hid behind his wall of silence. It was just me, sitting on the edge of the bed in my small room, my hands still trembling from the shove earlier that day. On the floor, a few crumpled, dirt-stained shirts that had been dragged around lay quietly, witnesses to the humiliation I'd endured. I picked them up, pressed them to my chest, and tears welled up. But these weren't weak tears anymore. They were bitter, hot, and burning like embers. I thought of Robert. If he were alive, he wouldn't let me suffer like this. I remembered his warm voice in the hospital. "Margaret, promise me you'll live strongly, even without me." Back then, I nodded. But over the years, I poured all my strength into Lucas, forgetting myself. I thought love and sacrifice would bind my son to me, but instead, they turned me into a shadow easily trampled. I looked around the room. The wedding photo of Robert and me still hung on the wall, our eyes full of hope. I walked over, gently touched the frame, and whispered, "Honey, I've lost too much already. I let them take my money, my keepsakes, my dignity, but tonight, no one will take anything more from me." A cold yet resolute surge ran down my spine. I recalled every detail of the past months, the massive credit card bills, the money vanishing from my account, my missing wedding ring, Naomi's gleaming eyes when she mentioned nursing homes. It all formed a single picture. They never saw me as a mother, as family. To Naomi, I was just a money tree. To Lucas, I was a burden. The truth hurt, but it also woke me up. I sat at the desk, opened the drawer, and pulled out my old notebook where I tracked monthly expenses. The pages had yellowed, but every number was proof of how hard I'd worked my whole life. I began writing again, listing every expense I'd covered for Lucas and Naomi since moving here. $500 for roof repairs, $1,200 for the living room sofa, $800 for a trip I never went on. The more I wrote, the steadier my hand, the clearer my eyes. These numbers were no longer proof of blind sacrifice, but weapons I'd used to reclaim justice for myself. That night, I also opened my phone, researching the legal rights of the elderly. Articles and stories showed me I wasn't alone. Many older women had been exploited, coerced, even robbed by their own families. Some stayed silent, but others fought back and won. I saw myself in them, and for the first time in months, I felt hope. Outside the window, the wind howled, dragging the remaining trash bag across the yard. I watched it tumble in the dark and told myself, "They think I'm just garbage to be thrown away. They're wrong. I'm still here, and I'll fight." Before bed, I opened my old diary and wrote one clear line. "From today, I'm no longer prey. I'll write my own story." I closed the diary, placed it by my pillow, and lay down. For the first time in months, I closed my eyes not in despair, but with a plan forming in my mind. That night of awakening changed me forever. I was no longer the gentle, patient mother, clinging to the illusion that love could buy respect. I had become someone new, ready for the battle I knew was coming. This time, I wouldn't tremble or cry in the dark. This time, I would fight back with all the strength I had left. From that night of awakening, I knew I couldn't just sit and endure anymore. I had to act. I didn't have the strength to scream like Naomi or the hope that Lucas would suddenly wake up. All I had was patience, the sharp memory of someone who'd survived on a meager salary, and above all, determination. I couldn't fight with fists, but I could fight with evidence. The next morning, I woke early, before Naomi came downstairs with her usual scowl. I quietly made coffee, but no longer set it out for the family. I took it to my room, closed the door, and opened the notebook I'd written in the night before. I began meticulously listing every expense I'd covered, not just the amounts, but dates, reasons, and witnesses, if any. For example, April last year, $1,200, living room sofa. Note, Lucas was present, signed the receipt. Or July, $800. Naomi said it was for hospital costs. No receipt provided. I wrote in detail, each line a pin in their lies, but the notebook wasn't enough. I knew I needed stronger evidence. Receipts, bank statements, even Naomi's voice when she threatened me. So I made a plan. That day, while Naomi was out shopping, I pretended I needed cash and quietly went to the bank. I knew the staff there, having opened the account decades ago. When I asked for a printout of the last 6 months' transactions, the clerk looked concerned. "Are you sure? There are some large withdrawals." I nodded, my hand trembling slightly but my eyes firm. The thick stack of papers fell into my hands like treasure. I flipped through, my heart tightening at the sight of transfers to an unfamiliar account. Thousands, even tens of thousands, gone, and I knew Naomi's hand was behind it. That evening, I hid the papers in a secret drawer in my wardrobe. But I still wasn't at ease. I needed living proof of Naomi's treatment. Her threats she cleverly hushed when Lucas or others were around. I found a tiny recorder online, no bigger than a finger, that could be discreetly placed under the dining table or in the living room. When it arrived, my heart raced like a young girl doing something sneaky for the first time. I knew I was entering a real war. The first time I turned on the recorder, my heart nearly leapt out of my chest. Naomi was in the living room, talking on the phone. Her voice came through clearly. "I swear, the old lady's only good for paying. Every month I squeeze out a chunk. In a few years, when she's too weak, I'll send her straight to a nursing home. Then this house is fully mine, and Lucas's." I replayed it multiple times, each time feeling both pain and triumph. Pain, for hearing exactly how they saw me. Triumph, for finally holding undeniable proof. I kept up the routine. I placed the recorder under the sofa, in the kitchen, even in my car's trunk. The results exceeded my expectations. I got Naomi calling me a parasite, mocking me for foolishly selling my apartment without keeping ownership. I even recorded her yelling at Lucas, "You stand with me, not her. The money's ours, not that old lady's." But what chilled me most was a late night when Naomi and Lucas thought I was asleep. I heard Naomi whisper, "Don't go soft. If you let her keep controlling the money, we'll never hold our heads up. She needs to leave this house, nursing home, anywhere, just not here." Lucas didn't respond right away. After a pause, I heard him mutter, "Do what you want. I don't want to argue anymore." My heart shattered. My son, the one I thought would be my rock, had become a silent accomplice. I knew I had to keep all this evidence safe. I bought a small locked metal box and hid it under the bed. In it, I stored the notebook, bank statements, and a USB with the recordings. Each addition to the box made me feel lighter, like I was building a new protective wall around myself. But I also knew evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed an ally, someone who knew the law, who could turn what I had into legal weapons. And I had to stay completely silent, not letting Naomi suspect. I played the obedient role, doing chores, cooking dinner, quietly washing dishes. But in my mind, I was preparing for battle. One weekend night, I sat in my room, replaying Naomi's recorded scream, "This house is no longer yours." I turned the volume low, listening over and over. But this time, I didn't tremble. My lips tightened, my eyes hardened. Each humiliating sound became a call to action, a wake-up bell. I knew when the right moment came, I'd bring everything to light. And then, Naomi would have nowhere to hide. After days of quietly gathering evidence, I began to feel the burden was too heavy to carry alone. I kept everything in the locked metal box under my bed, but the fear of being discovered kept me awake many nights. One wrong move, Naomi snooping through my drawers, or Lucas stumbling in, and all my efforts would vanish. I needed someone to share this with, an ally I could trust. The first person who came to mind was Alice, my next-door neighbor. Alice, a few years older than me, a widow living alone in a small house, was never truly close, just exchanging greetings in the yard. But her eyes always held warmth. That day, After Naomi left with her friends, I mustered the courage to knock on Alice's door. When she opened it and saw my weary face, she didn't ask much, just gently said, "Come in, Margaret. You don't look well." We sat at her kitchen table, the faint scent of chamomile tea in the air. I couldn't hold back, sobbing uncontrollably. Between sobs, I told her everything. Selling my old apartment, giving all my savings to Lucas and Naomi, the months of being belittled in that house, and recently, Naomi stuffing my clothes into trash bags. Alice listened silently, her eyes full of empathy. When I mentioned secretly recording, her hand squeezed mine. "You did the right thing. I went through something similar with my daughter. She took my money, then treated me like a burden. Without a lawyer and evidence, I'd have lost everything." Her words shocked and relieved me. I wasn't alone. More importantly, Alice knew the path I was on. She pulled a small wooden box from a drawer and placed it on the table. "I still have flyers from the Elder Protection Agency. They have a hotline. If you want, I can call for you." I took them with trembling hands, feeling like I'd been handed a lifeline. We talked until evening. Alice shared how her daughter threatened to cut ties and even brought a lawyer to intimidate her. But she won in the end. When people get greedy, they make mistakes. Your job is to be patient, gather every piece of evidence, and when the time comes, it'll all turn against them. Before I left, Alice gave me a small key. "If you're ever kicked out or feel unsafe, my door is always open." I clutched the key, too choked up to speak. After months of fear and loneliness, I'd found an ally. Back in my room, I opened the metal box, took out a bank statement and a few recordings, and secretly gave them to Alice for safekeeping. She nodded firmly. "They're safer here. Naomi would never think you trust me this much." My heart lightened. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly, but Alice's help didn't stop there. A few days later, she came over, pretending to borrow the phone, then whispered, "Yesterday, I overheard Naomi talking in the garden. She said, if you don't sign over full ownership to Lucas, she'll arrange to put you in a nursing home. You need to add this to your records." I nodded, jotting it down in my notebook. Every detail was now a brick in my defensive wall. One afternoon, while Naomi was arguing with a delivery guy, Alice called me over. She opened her laptop, showing me a video from her security camera. There was Naomi, clear as day, dragging the trash bag with my clothes to the yard, throwing it onto the steps. Neighbors gathered at the fence, and I stood frozen in the living room. My heart pounded watching it, but this time, instead of shame, I felt elation. This was visual proof, something Naomi could never deny. Holding the USB with the video, trembling, Alice smiled. "Don't be afraid anymore, Margaret. You have me, and soon, you'll have the law on your side." I hugged her tightly, feeling like I'd found a long-lost sister. That evening, back in my room, Naomi banged on the door, her voice shrill. "Tomorrow, you need to give me a new credit card. The old one's almost expired. If not, I won't let you rest." I calmly replied, "Naomi, I'll figure it out tomorrow. I'm not promising anything." I heard her hiss through the door, but I no longer trembled, because I knew every threat, every cruel act, was now witnessed, safely stored. I wasn't completely alone anymore. That night, I wrote in my diary, "I found an ally. The fire in me no longer burns alone." With Alice by my side, I felt like I'd stepped through a new door. I was no longer lost, no longer trembling in the dark, but I also knew a kind neighbor's help wasn't enough. Naomi wouldn't stop if she saw me resist. She'd find ways to control me, even invent crueler lies. If I wanted to protect myself, I needed the law behind me. That meant finding a lawyer. One Monday morning, when Naomi and Lucas were out, I quietly put on a sweater, grabbed my small purse. Inside were the USB with recordings, bank statements, a few receipts, and my notebook of expenses. I stopped by Alice's first. She nodded as I prepared to leave. "Tell the lawyer everything, Margaret. Don't hold back. They'll know how to protect you." She handed me a business card. "David Harper, attorney at law, elder protection specialist. He helped me before," she whispered, "and I believe he'll help you." On the way to the lawyer's office, my heart pounded. I feared Naomi might call to check on me, and I trembled at the thought of bearing everything to a stranger. But I knew if I didn't start today, I'd never find the courage. Harper's office was in a small, simple, tidy building. The receptionist smiled warmly, leading me to his office. Mr. Harper, a middle-aged man with graying hair and sharp, calm eyes, shook my hand firmly. Mrs. Richter, Alice told me a bit. Think of me as an ally. You can say anything without fear of judgment. His opening words unlocked a floodgate in me. I told him everything. Selling my old apartment, giving all my savings to Lucas and Naomi for the house, the months of humiliation, and the peak when Naomi threw my clothes into trash bags. My voice shook, but I stayed composed, handing him the papers and USB. Harper listened intently, occasionally nodding or jotting notes. After nearly an hour, he set down his pen, looking straight at me. Mrs. Margaret, what you've experienced is textbook elder financial abuse, a crime under the law. Your evidence, from bank statements to recordings, is crucial. They show not just exploitation, but threats and humiliation. I believe we have a strong case. I sat stunned, hardly believing my ears. For months, I thought I was just an unlucky victim, not realizing Naomi's actions could face legal consequences. But I hesitated. Naomi won't admit it. She's clever, always playing the good wife and daughter-in-law in front of neighbors. Lucas, Harper gave a faint smile. I've seen hundreds of cases like this. Abusers are often great at hiding, but the law doesn't care about their facade. It cares about evidence. And you did the smartest thing, gathering proof before it's too late. Naomi's recorded threat to put you in a nursing home is enough to shake a courtroom. I trembled, but not from fear. For the first time, I felt real hope. Harper continued, here's the plan. First, I'll file a lawsuit against Naomi for property theft and elder abuse. Meanwhile, we'll prepare for any counterattacks, like them claiming you're mentally unfit. I'll have a psychologist and doctor ready to prove you're fully competent. We're not just defending, we're attacking. I sat silently, his words like cool water. I'd been cornered in darkness, but now I saw light at the tunnel's end. I asked softly, if I do this, will Lucas get dragged in? He's my son. I don't want to ruin his life. Harper paused. I understand your pain, but the truth is, if Lucas is silent or complicit, he'll face consequences. Still, courts often focus on the mastermind, and from your story, I believe that's Naomi. I bit my lip. My heart ached, thinking of my son, but I remembered Lucas's bowed head in the living room, letting Naomi throw out my things. I recalled his averted eyes when I begged for one word of defense. The pain turned into a cold steel around my heart. I whispered, if that's the price, I accept it. I've lost too much already. Before I left, Harper gave me a file. Keep documenting every detail, every conversation, and send me any new evidence. Don't let them know what you're doing. We'll let their greed trip them up. I gripped the file, stepping outside. The sun shone brightly. Unlike the gloom in my heart for months, I walked slowly, feeling the breeze through my gray hair. A voice inside me said, Margaret, you're finally taking back your life. When I got home, Naomi was at the door, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. Where were you all morning? I smiled calmly, visiting an old friend. I walked past her, heart pounding, but lips still smiling. For the first time in years, I was no longer passive prey. I had a lawyer, a plan, and a real fight waiting ahead. From the moment I met with Attorney Harper, I carried a secret in my heart, both terrified of being found out and feeling the fire within me burn brighter than ever. I continued to act normal, cooking, cleaning, quietly doing small chores around the house. But I had silently stopped all automatic bank transfers that Naomi had been freely using for so long. I also asked the bank to cancel the credit card in my name that she regularly took shopping. To Naomi, I was still the obedient old lady, but in reality, the financial lifelines she clung to were slowly disappearing. And when the money tap was turned off, the truth quickly came to light. Naomi and Lucas could no longer maintain their calm facade. That evening, Naomi stormed into my room, clutching an unpaid bill, her eyes blazing with fury. Mom, why isn't the credit card working anymore? They said it's been locked, and the rent transfer account hasn't received anything either. What's going on? I looked up from the notebook I was writing in, my voice calm. I've decided to stop. From now on, you two need to handle your own expenses. In that moment, Naomi's face changed. She screamed as if someone had grabbed her by the throat. You can't do this. We rely on that money to pay debts, to live. Who do you think you are to cut us off like that? I replied softly, still surprised by my own steadiness. I'm the one who worked my whole life to earn that money, and I have the right to decide who it goes to. Naomi threw the bill onto the table, papers scattering everywhere. Lucas stood at the door, looking in with a tired expression, as if wanting to avoid the scene. I looked at my son, hoping he'd speak, but he only stammered, "Mom, you could have at least told us first." I let out a dry laugh. Told you, so you could find ways to squeeze more out of me before I could stop it. My words made Lucas lower his head, but Naomi didn't back down. She stepped closer, pointing right at my face. Listen, old lady, you have no place here if you don't have money. I'm saying it straight. Either you keep paying or you're out of this house. I stood up, my heart pounding, but my voice stronger than ever. This house exists because of my money. If anyone's leaving, it's not me. Naomi was speechless for a few seconds, then turned to Lucas, her voice suddenly sweet. Look, your mom's not normal anymore. She's delusional, thinking everything belongs to her. We have to do something, or this will all fall apart. Her words sent a chill down my spine. I suddenly understood. Naomi was starting to use the exact tactic Harper had warned me about, claiming I was losing my mind to strip me of control. That night, tensions exploded further. Naomi brought 2 friends to the house, carrying a thick stack of papers. They spread them out on the dining table and tried to pressure me to sign. This is just a temporary financial power of attorney, Naomi said, barely hiding her irritation. You're old. Sometimes you get confused. It's better to let Lucas and me handle things. Don't worry, we'll take care of you. I stared at the papers and gave a faint smile. I didn't need to read them to know what they were. I'm not signing. One of Naomi's friends leaned forward. You should think about your future. You don't want to end up in a nursing home alone, do you? I looked straight into his eyes, my voice icy. Don't threaten me. I'm used to those words by now. Naomi slammed her hand on the table, shouting, Fine, be stubborn. Let's see how you survive without us. I pointed to the door. You're the ones who won't survive without me. Get out of my room now. The group grumbled but eventually left, leaving the dining table littered with papers. Lucas lingered, his face a mix of sadness and anger. Mom, why do you have to make this so hard? Naomi just wants what's best for you. I looked at my son, no longer seeing the boy who used to hug me to sleep on stormy nights. Instead, I saw a tired, dependent, weak man. I replied softly, No, Lucas, Naomi only wants what's best for herself. You're too blind to see it. Lucas flushed, turned away, leaving me alone in the room filled with the smell of old papers and gloom. I sat down, my heart still racing. I knew I had entered a real battle. Naomi had shown her true face, no longer pretending to be kind. She would do anything to regain control of my money. But this time, I was ready. I had evidence, a lawyer, and a will of steel. That night, I opened my diary and wrote, They've started attacking openly, but I won't back down. Each threat only makes me stronger. This battle has just begun. After that tense confrontation, I knew things had crossed a new line. Naomi was no longer hiding. Her threats, her contemptuous glares, even bringing strangers to pressure me into signing a power of attorney, all of it proved she wouldn't stop. But I was different. I was prepared, and now it was time to strengthen everything. I would turn my humiliation into a legal counterattack. The next morning, I went to Harper's office with the metal box in hand. Inside was everything I'd collected: bank statements, receipts, recordings, and the video from Alice's camera. When I set the box on his desk, Harper said gravely, This is a treasure, Margaret, undeniable evidence. We'll build the case from here. We spent hours together. I read through every note in my notebook, detailing every incident, every time Naomi used my card, every insulting remark. Harper had me sign to make everything legally admissible. Then he called a psychologist to schedule a cognitive evaluation. They'll definitely try to claim you're incompetent. We need medical proof to counter that, he explained. I nodded, feeling both heavy and resolute. We also made a list of witnesses. First was Alice, the neighbor who saw Naomi throw my clothes out and had the video as proof. Second was the bank employee who could confirm large withdrawals not for my benefit. Third was the jewelry store clerk, where Naomi sold my wedding ring. Harper also suggested finding friends or acquaintances who'd heard me complain, as indirect testimony held value. I thought of the grocery store owner near the house, where I bought small items. Once, I couldn't pay because Naomi had drained my account, and the owner let me buy on credit. I decided to ask her to testify. These small details would paint the full picture of the prolonged abuse I'd endured. As I left the office, Harper cautioned, "From now on, be extremely careful. Don't let Naomi know you have a lawyer. If they find out, they'll try to turn the tables before we can act. Keep playing the submissive role." I nodded. I knew Naomi was sharp and always suspicious. I had to act defeated for a while longer to let the plan ripen. In the days that followed, I kept documenting everything. Once Naomi barged in demanding a new credit card. I quietly turned on the recorder in my pocket. She yelled, "If you don't listen, I'll call the police. Say you're confused and need a guardian." I kept a trembling expression, but inside, I smiled bitterly. Every word she said, I had proof of. That evening, I went to Alice's, handing her the new recording. She looked at me, her eyes firm. "You're on the right path. I'll testify for you whenever you need." As the filing date neared, I felt growing pressure. But whenever doubt crept in, I opened my diary and read the line I'd written, "I'm no longer prey." It was a vow reminding me this was the only path to reclaim my dignity. One afternoon, Harper called. "Margaret, the case file is almost ready. Just one more thing, write a statement, not just about the money, but your emotions. The court needs to see this isn't just financial, it's prolonged emotional abuse." I spent the night writing. I described the humiliation of being shooed from the living room, the cold meals eaten alone in the kitchen, Lucas's averted eyes when I needed him. As I wrote, tears fell, but this time I didn't feel weak. I felt I was turning pain into evidence. When I gave the statement to Harper, he read it slowly, then looked up. "You know, this is the strongest part. It shows you didn't just lose money, you lost respect, emotional safety. The court won't ignore this." That weekend, Harper and I met with the legal support team. They reviewed every page of the file, organized evidence, and prepared strategies for the upcoming trial. Seeing the thick file with my name on the cover, I felt like a warrior donning armor. I was no longer the trembling woman clutching a trash bag of clothes. I was ready for battle. That evening, Naomi unexpectedly knocked on my door, forcing a smile. "Mom, I know we've had misunderstandings. How about we go eat together tomorrow?" I saw through her fake smile and knew she was worried. She must have sensed my change, but I only said lightly, "Maybe another day," and closed the door. In the dark, I wrote another diary entry. "The battle is near. I'm no longer afraid. I have the truth on my side." I vividly remember that morning, the day of the first court hearing. I woke before dawn, my heart pounding like a war drum. In the mirror, I saw my wrinkled face, eyes shadowed from sleepless nights. But in those eyes was something new, resolve. I wore a simple black dress and a long coat. As I fastened the last button, I whispered to myself, "Margaret, today isn't just a trial. It's the day you reclaim your dignity." Harper met me in the courthouse lobby, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Stay calm. You have me here. They'll try to smear you, but the truth will speak for itself." We entered the courtroom. The air was thick, tense like a taut string. Across the room, Naomi sat upright, in an expensive deep red dress, face perfectly made up, eyes brimming with confidence. Beside her was Lucas, head down, avoiding my gaze. I saw his hands tremble, but he didn't look my way. My heart ached, but I pushed it down. I wouldn't let myself be weak now. Their lawyer, a man about 50, stepped forward with a calm demeanor, speaking slowly, as if telling a touching story. "Your Honor, we're not here to try a crime, but to protect an elderly woman who's become confused and paranoid. My clients, Naomi and Lucas, are simply dutiful children trying to help their mother through a difficult time. Sadly, Mrs. Margaret has misunderstood, and now, instead of receiving love, they're being dragged to court. Each word stabbed like a knife. He continued, voice full of emotion. For months, Mrs. Margaret has shown erratic behavior, canceling transfers, locking credit cards, and accusing her son and daughter-in-law of theft without proof. She's refused medical care, insisting she's fine, when clearly age and loneliness have made her vulnerable to outside influence. I saw a few people in the courtroom nod slightly. Heat rushed to my face, but I clenched my hands, telling myself to be patient. This was just their opening act. Naomi was their first witness. She took the stand, eyes red, voice trembling as if recounting a tragedy. I've always treated my mother-in-law like my own mother, but lately, she's changed so much. She forgets things, sometimes forgetting she gave us money, then accusing us of stealing. She locks cards, then says she doesn't remember doing it. My husband and I just want to help her, but she thinks we're plotting against her. It's really heartbreaking. Naomi broke into tears, tears streaming down. A perfect performance. I heard murmurs in the room, sympathetic eyes turning to her. Anger surged in me like a wave. I wanted to scream that it was all lies, that she'd drained me to my last penny, but I held back, knowing my moment hadn't come. Their lawyer pressed, "Can you elaborate on Mrs. Margaret's unusual behaviors?" Naomi nodded, sobbing. Once, she cooked but forgot to turn on the stove. Another day, she went out, leaving the door wide open. We were so worried, afraid she'd get hurt. We just want to protect her. I gripped the chair's edge. Every word was a twisted truth. I remembered the forgotten stove day. Naomi kept calling, distracting me. The open door? She was the last to leave that day. She was weaving a false picture, painting me as a senile old woman. Then Lucas took the stand, his voice hoarse. "My mom used to be amazing, but lately she's changed. She gets angry for no reason, suspects everything. Naomi and I tried to get her to see a doctor, but she refused. We had no choice but to ask the court for help." His words felt like the world collapsing. My son, my flesh and blood, stood there, publicly against me. I wanted to scream, "Lucas, have you forgotten who raised you, who sold her lifelong home for you?" But I bit my lip, staying silent. Tears welled up, but I didn't let them fall. Their side called a few minor witnesses. A grumpy neighbor, Davis, claimed he saw me yelling in the yard, saying I seemed out of control. A grocery store clerk, manipulated by Naomi, said I often forgot to pay. Each testimony was a hammer blow, chipping away at my image in court. Their lawyer concluded with a firm tone, "Your Honor, we're witnessing a classic case of cognitive decline in the elderly. Without guardianship, Mrs. Margaret may continue making dangerous financial decisions, harming herself and her family. My clients only want to protect their mother, and they don't deserve to be dragged to court for acting out of love." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. I saw doubtful eyes turn to me. For a moment, I felt truly alone against the world. But then I recalled Harper's words, "Let them lay it all out. The more they build their story, the harder it'll fall when we present evidence." I took a deep breath, sat up straight, and wiped my tears. When the judge asked if I had a rebuttal, Harper stood, his voice commanding, "Your Honor, we respect the plaintiff's testimony, but we have evidence showing their entire story is a fabrication. However, before our turn, we request the court allow us to present witnesses and evidence tomorrow. We need time to prepare." The judge nodded, striking the gavel. "The hearing will continue tomorrow for the defense to present evidence." I exhaled, my legs weak. As we left the courtroom, Naomi brushed past me, her eyes cold, but her lips smirking. She whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "You won't win, old lady." I looked straight into her eyes, unflinching. "We'll see." That night, I went to Alice's house. She hugged me, whispering, "Don't lose heart. Today was their stage. Tomorrow is yours." I sat in Alice's small living room, the yellow lamplight falling on my tea, a fiery resolve rising within me. They'd accused me, staged a perfect play. But tomorrow, I'd tear down their curtain of lies. And when the truth flooded in, Naomi would have nowhere to hide. The next day, as I entered the courtroom, The atmosphere was different. Gone was the overwhelm and doubt of yesterday. I was prepared, I had evidence, and most importantly, I had the truth on my side. Harper sat beside me, opening his thick briefcase, his eyes gleaming with confidence. He whispered, "Today is our day, Margaret. Trust me." The judge struck the gavel, starting the next session. Naomi's lawyer sat with legs crossed, a smug smile, as if certain of victory from yesterday. But they had no idea their play was about to be torn apart. Harper stood, his voice resonant and clear. "Your Honor, yesterday the plaintiffs painted a story that Mrs. Margaret, a 72-year-old woman, is confused and paranoid, that her son and daughter-in-law are only trying to protect her. But today, we'll show the truth. Mrs. Margaret isn't the one needing guardianship. She's the victim of prolonged financial and emotional abuse. And the mastermind behind it all is Naomi." The courtroom stirred. Naomi raised an eyebrow, still trying to stay calm. Lucas lowered his head, his hands clasped, trembling slightly. Harper held up the first file. "These are Mrs. Margaret's bank statements from the past 3 years. The court can see tens of thousands of dollars withdrawn or transferred to an account in Naomi's name. This money wasn't used for Mrs. Margaret's needs but for luxury shopping, trips, and other personal expenses." He handed the papers to the judge, then displayed them on a large screen. The numbers appeared, cold and undeniable. I saw sweat bead on Naomi's forehead. Next, Harper pulled out a USB, plugging it in. Naomi's voice echoed through the courtroom, clear as day. "In a few years, when she's too weak, I'll send her straight to a nursing home. Then this house is fully mine and Lucas's." The room erupted in murmurs. I saw people startle, staring at Naomi. Her face paled, her lips trembling. Her lawyer jumped up to object. "Your Honor, this recording could be edited, unreliable." But Harper was ready. "This is the original, extracted directly from the device, verified by an independent audio expert. No edits." The judge nodded, allowing it to continue. Naomi swallowed hard, head down. Our first witness was Alice. She took the stand with a steady demeanor, her voice clear. "I'm Mrs. Margaret's neighbor. I saw Naomi throw her clothes into the yard in front of neighbors. I also have security camera footage capturing the entire incident." The video played. The room fell silent, only Naomi's shouts echoing. "This house is no longer yours." I saw Lucas bury his face in his hands, shoulders shaking. Next was the bank employee, confirming Naomi's frequent withdrawals, even signing papers without my presence. Then the jewelry store owner, verifying Naomi sold my wedding ring. Each witness was another cut into Naomi's facade. Finally, Harper said, "Your Honor, to end all doubt, I call our key witness, Mrs. Margaret, the victim herself." I stood, legs trembling, but steps firm. I sat at the stand, took a deep breath, and looked straight at the judge. "My name is Margaret, 72 years old. For 3 years, I gave all the money from selling my old apartment and my life savings to buy a house I thought would be a happy home with my son and daughter-in-law. But since moving in, I've been treated like an outsider. I've been insulted, shooed from the living room, forced to eat alone. Every penny of mine was spent by Naomi for herself, and when I fought back, she threatened to send me to a nursing home." My voice caught, but I pressed on. "I sacrificed my whole life for my son, but in return, I was turned into a walking wallet. That day, when my clothes were thrown into trash bags, I realized I was no longer seen as a human being, and I decided I had to fight." Tears fell from my eyes, but they were no longer tears of weakness. They were tears of truth. Naomi's lawyer stood up, beginning his cross-examination. "Mrs. Margaret, do you admit that sometimes you forget whether you've given money to your son?" I looked straight into his eyes. "I don't forget. I've recorded every penny in this notebook. This is proof." I held up the notebook, its pages filled with meticulous notes. Harper handed it to the court to review. The lawyer pressed, "Are you certain your mental state is completely sound?" At that moment, Harper signaled, and a psychologist took the stand. "I personally evaluated Mrs. Margaret. She is fully lucid, with excellent memory and analytical skills for her age. Naomi's lawyer was speechless. I saw Naomi shrink in her seat, her eyes blazing with anger. As I stepped down from the stand, the courtroom buzzed. I sat next to Harper, feeling as if I'd shed a 1,000-pound burden. He leaned in and whispered, "You did great. They've shot themselves in the foot." The hearing ended with the advantage clearly on our side. The judge announced that all evidence would be reviewed and a ruling would be made at the final hearing. Naomi left the courtroom pale, while Lucas trailed silently behind, unable to meet my eyes. I walked out of the courthouse, with my head held high. For the first time in years, I was no longer the submissive mother, the despised old lady. I was Margaret, a woman who dared to stand against injustice, and I knew the truth was starting to prevail. That morning, I entered the courtroom with a completely different feeling. No more trembling, no more heart pounding with fear. I had gone through a long journey, from the humiliation of having my clothes thrown into trash bags, to sitting in court, telling my truth through tears, but with pride. Today, I awaited only one thing, the verdict. Naomi was there early, wearing a plain gray dress, trying to appear demure. Lucas sat beside her, his face haggard, eyes red as if he hadn't slept. I glanced at my son, my heart aching, but I forced myself to look away. I couldn't let maternal love sway me at this critical moment. Judge Miller entered, striking the gavel 3 times, his voice resonating through the room. After reviewing all evidence and testimony from both sides, the court will now deliver its ruling. The room fell silent. No one dared breathe loudly. I could hear my heart beating steadily. The judge read slowly. The plaintiffs, Naomi and Lucas, accused Mrs. Margaret of lacking mental capacity, requesting full guardianship of her finances. However, their evidence was insufficient and riddled with contradictions. In contrast, the defendant, Mrs. Margaret, provided compelling evidence of Naomi's financial exploitation, unauthorized withdrawals, and explicit threats. He paused, looking directly at Naomi. The recordings, neighbors' video, witness testimonies, and bank records prove this was not care but theft. Naomi's face paled, her lips trembling. I saw her grip Lucas's arm tightly, but Lucas no longer responded. The judge struck the gavel. The court dismisses all guardianship requests from Naomi and Lucas. Furthermore, the court finds Naomi guilty of elder financial abuse. She is ordered to repay Mrs. Margaret $33,400 for funds misappropriated over 3 years and is barred from contact with Mrs. Margaret for the next 5 years. Murmurs filled the room. I covered my mouth, tears streaming down unexpectedly, not of pain, but of liberation. Naomi jumped up, shouting, "This is unjust." She manipulated everything, fabricated it all. The judge's voice was stern. "Sit down, or I'll have the bailiff escort you out." Naomi gasped, collapsing into her seat, her face contorted with rage. Lucas turned to me, his eyes meeting mine for the first time in months, red and tearful. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I let things go too far." I looked at my son, 1,000 emotions swirling inside. Love, disappointment, pain, and regret. I whispered, "Lucas, I forgave you long ago, but I can't forgive your silence." That silence was crueler than Naomi's words. Lucas sobbed, head bowed, but I knew my forgiveness didn't mean things could return to how they were. Some wounds never fully heal. When the judge concluded the hearing, I stood, my legs light as if a 1,000-pound weight had been lifted. I left the courtroom, the sunlight outside, like a blessing. Alice waited for me on the steps, grasping my hand. "I told you, Margaret. You won." I hugged her, tears falling on her shoulder. "Not just the case," I whispered. "I won against my own fear." That afternoon, I returned to the house that had been a place of pain. I walked into my room, looking around the walls, the wedding photo of Robert and me, the old bed. But I knew this was no longer a home. It had become a battlefield, filled with sad memories. I decided it was time to leave. A few weeks later, I sold the house and used part of the money to buy a small apartment in the city center. It was bright, with a balcony overlooking a park. I decorated it my way, hanging Robert's photo in the most prominent spot. I bought a new table and chairs, not for anyone else to sit at, but for me to sit and write. I began writing my story, not just to remember, but to empower other women, those pushed into the shadows by their own families. Lucas came to see me again, his face gaunt. He sat down, voice trembling. Mom, I know I've lost you, but I want you to know I'm truly sorry. I placed a hand on his shoulder. You haven't lost me, but I've chosen to live for myself. If you're sincere, one day you can come back to me, not for money, but for love, starting over. Lucas nodded, tears streaming down. He stood and left. I watched his back, my heart heavy but at peace. That evening, I opened the balcony door, looking at the starry sky. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. I whispered to Robert, Honey, I finally learned the lesson. I can't buy love, and I don't need to beg for respect. Freedom has its price, but it's never too costly. In my new apartment, I wrote one more line in my diary. Today, I set myself free. After the court's ruling, I felt released from an invisible shackle that had weighed on me for years. The first days in my new apartment felt empty. No more sound of Lucas's footsteps. No slamming doors from Naomi. No cold meals in the kitchen. Instead, there was absolute silence. But I soon realized it wasn't loneliness. It was peace. Each morning, I brewed a hot cup of tea, sat on the balcony, and looked down at the park. The sound of birds chirping and children playing below brought back old memories, but this time, they weren't painful. I smiled, thinking of Robert, recalling the days we sat together dreaming of a tranquil old age. Though he was gone, I knew he'd smile, seeing me finally stand up for myself. I began allowing myself things I'd set aside for years. I went to a salon, cut my gray hair short, and added a soft golden tint. The stylist said I looked years younger. I bought new shoes, not for anyone's party, but to wear them and walk my own path. I joined a painting class nearby, spending hours at the easel, letting colors erase the dark days. An urge grew within me. I had to tell my story, not for revenge, but so other women, mothers, wives, those who'd sacrificed their lives, knew they weren't alone. I wanted them to know that even when abandoned by family, we still have the right to live, to be respected. I bought a new hardcover notebook, titling the first page, Freedom Has No Price. I began writing, line by line, every memory. From the day I sold my old apartment, Lucas's gleaming eyes when I handed over the check, to Naomi's bitter laugh as she threw my clothes into trash bags. I wrote about the nights crying alone, the moment of awakening, and the silent journey of gathering evidence. I wrote about Alice's support, Harper's guidance, and the moment I stood in court, speaking the truth with all the strength I had left. Each page I wrote lifted another burden. The old wounds remained, but they became scars, and those scars, instead of making me ugly, became signs of strength. When I shared the first draft with Alice, she held my hand, eyes teary. Margaret, you're not just telling your story, you're telling the story of thousands of women out there. Her words fueled my resolve. I sent the draft to a women's elder support group and was surprised by their response. They wanted me to speak at a community meeting. I hesitated. I'd never stood before a crowd outside court. But then I recalled facing Naomi, the feeling of my voice ringing clear before the judge. I could do this. That day I stood on the podium, looking at dozens of faces, old and young, all filled with empathy. I told my story, hiding nothing, adding nothing. I spoke of the pain but also the rebirth. When I finished, the room applauded. A woman around 50 hugged me, whispering, "Your story is my story. Thank you for being brave." From then on, I joined more groups. I wrote articles for community magazines, sharing about elder financial abuse. I became a voice for those who thought they'd lost theirs, and miraculously, I no longer felt old or useless. I felt useful, needed, strong. As for Lucas, he still called occasionally. At first, the calls were hesitant, just small talk. Then one day, he came to my new apartment, standing outside for a long time before knocking. When I opened the door, he said softly, "Mom, I know I let you down. I don't expect you to forget, but please give me a chance to make it right." I looked at my son, his eyes wet, no longer arrogant. I invited him in, brewed him tea. I made no promises, but I let him sit, talk, listen. I understood that forgiveness isn't forgetting, but a way to lighten my own heart. That evening, I returned to my writing desk. I opened a new page in my notebook and wrote, "I'm no longer just surviving. I'm truly living. Now, every day begins with choices for myself. I can paint, write, walk in the park, or simply sit and listen to the wind. I no longer fear knocks at the door or jump when the phone rings. I've reclaimed my freedom, and it's sweeter than anything I've ever known. Looking back, I understand a simple truth. True love can't be bought with money. Respect can't be begged through sacrifice. And freedom, it's never too costly." My story ends here, but my life opens a new chapter. I, Margaret, 72, a widow once abandoned by her own family, now stand tall, knowing the most important person I need to love and protect is myself. Thank you for listening to this story, full of tears, but also strength, until the very end. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel to catch more stories, where I'll continue sharing the journeys of women who dare to reclaim their freedom and dignity.